So tonight we are going to be taking the tradition on with Fred Versonnen. Fred is a fantastic storyteller. He's a story lover, a storyteller. He is he's all sorts of things. He's an amazing man. He's a teacher, clown, philosopher, thinker, stilt walker, performer. He has been many things in his life, but he is central to the storytelling scene in Belgium, and that is what we are going to be talking about tonight. So welcome, and please put your virtual hands together for the marvellous Fred Versonnen. Woo! Whoop, whoop, whoop. Right, you have to click the unmute button. I'm trying to unmute you, but you've got to do it for yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. You tried to unmute me. I saw that.
Have you seen all the things that they're chat? So this is what your audience knows about Belgium.
Be writing Friesland, but that's actually Holland, not Belgium. I like somebody who said Jacques Brel, because I'm a huge fan of Jacques Brel. He is one of Belgium's absolute most fantastic artists we ever had. The great Jacques Brel. Everybody should listen to him because he was so wonderful. Hergé, Tintin, yes, and of course beer and chocolate. Yeah.
See, they put fries. I it's Friesland. I was just thinking of lots of fries, but obviously only with mayonnaise.
Yes.
So I'm afraid this is what you're up against. This is what we know. So I'm hoping that you are going to enlighten us tonight, because over the past year I've been getting to know a little bit more about Belgian storytelling and met some very, very fine Belgian storytellers. And of course, one of the amazing things about Belgian storytellers is most of them are exceptionally good at English, which is great, because my Belgian is rubbish. And we don't even really have Belgian as a language. And that's where the multilingual thing comes in. So you are a land of language, aren't you? And I imagine that with that, if you have a land of many languages, then you have a land of stories.
Well, Belgian is not a language, actually. We speak Flemish, or we speak French, or we speak German. That's the 3 official languages, but now we're speaking a lot of languages because there is a lot of diversity, like in every country. And so there are far more languages. When you go to school now, you have sometimes a class filled with children, and there are like maybe 10, 12 languages, the mother tongue of what they speak. And so we are a very diverse country. I think we are not the only one, but that's a bit typical for Belgium, I think, because we were always lying in the crossroads. And actually Belgium just existed since 1830. So it's a very young country. It's a bit an artificial country too. It was like a construct by a society that made and created Belgium. But Flanders, and I speak Flemish, is far more older. Let us say we are crossroads when the Romans came and conquered us, like they conquered everything. The language, the Latin, divided already what is now Belgium in 2 parts. So the Germanic part and the Latin part. And we have like the 2 most important languages are French and are Flemish. And it's not easy, mais je peux parler en français parce que je vis en Belgique. So I can speak French because we do, and I didn't like it. But thanks to Jacques Brel and listening to his music, I really wanted to understand what he was singing. And he was the main gate for me to learn French.
So Flemish is your first language?
That's my first language, Flemish. And Flemish is kind of a Germanic language. And we share that language with the Dutch. It's the same language, different accent, but it's the same language. Like English is spoken by the Queen, and all the rest of England speaks in their own dialect. Like, and the Mancunians speak Mancunian, and the Midlander people from Birmingham speak Brummie, and everybody has his own language there. And actually, it's very funny because when I invite an English storyteller, the people who are studying English in our schools here, because some people choose to learn English, they learn the Queen's English. And they come to my venue, and then they listen to a storyteller from England. And after
I haven't got a clue.
I understand him really well, because he speaks another kind of English than we learned, and they learned the official English.
Yeah, I feel very sorry for people who learn English and then actually come to England, because there are so many accents. So obviously, I mean, we're going to go off, knowing you, we're going to go off in all sorts of amazing directions tonight. But this is primarily, first and foremost, a storytelling program. And I would love to know more about the storytelling scene in Belgium. And also, if there's these two primary languages, kind of the French half and the Germanic side, the Flemish and the Dutch and the German languages, that sounds like there's going to be lots of stories coming from lots of different places, and that Belgium's going to have quite unique kind of traditional storytelling and storytelling culture. I don't know if that's still around, but that those old stories are going to still be part of that culture.
Well, it's that we have collectors. There were a lot of people, like when Belgium just existed, there were like priests or there were people who were, and it's in every land, who collected the folk tales. They were not collected by the people of the folk, but they were collected by people who worked on universities. Sometimes there was maybe a little teacher who edited a little book from like in a very small, how you say that, amount of books. But mostly the stories were collected by academics. And there are of course a lot of stories. There are a lot of variations of the stories. When you see a story that's collected in Flanders, or in a big city like Bruges or Ghent or Antwerp or Leuven, then you see there are a lot of variations all over the place, but not only in Flanders, but also in the northern part of France, in our German-speaking part. We have actually, and that's the thing with stories, isn't it? Stories are traveling around and they leave their borders. And a lot of stories we tell, they also tell in Holland or in Germany or in France or even in England. Or we tell the stories they're telling in England, or the English telling stories from us. I don't know, because England was conquered a lot. And we traveled the stories to England, and in England, and you don't know where is the true origin of a story. What I do know is that like in England and France, who were two mighty countries with mighty kings, and they conquered a lot. You have these heroic stories often, with heroes. Belgium and Flanders was, and certainly since, and that's a little bit history, when the Spanish came, in the Reformation War and Holland became independent, everything with brains, every big artist ran away and left this land behind. And it was really a poor land. And then there were, the Dutch were in charge here, the Austrians were in charge, the Spanish were in charge. And we tell stories like, when the wind is really working very hard, you bow like the grass. You don't fight it because you will break. And we have a lot of those stories. The Flemish are like always crawling in the underdog position. And that's a big difference, like when in the Dutch, and you see it in our behavior. You see it even in sports. When a Dutch comes, they're like, we are coming here to win. When a Flemish guy or a Belgian guy comes, it's like, well, I try to do my best. And when I'm in 10th place, I will be very happy. It's just an observation, but a lot of our mentality is like that. And you find it also in a lot of the stories, of the older stories we tell about ourselves. We try actually now because Belgium and Flanders is a very rich country. And we try now to recreate our history a little bit. We try to recreate a history where we can be proud of. But a lot of them will be fake. That's what they do. That's what actually every big nation is doing, is trying to recreate a little bit of history, the big battles we won, and so on and so on. And then it becomes very strange. And then I think about what the great Jack Lynch, the Irish storyteller, says: history is written by the victors, and we sing the songs.
Well, I mean, Belgium's packed in an awful lot of history. I mean, considering it's quite a new country from 1830, I mean, since then, I mean, you've been quite a world power. You know, you've had the colony in Congo, but then you've also been kind of much more downtrodden by being where you were kind of in the Second World War. I don't think things went quite so well. I mean, it seems to have been kind of quite a tumultuous, you know, not even quite 200 years, less than 200 years.
Yeah. We carry because Belgium is very young, but the cities were very powerful. The city of Antwerp, the city of Bruges, the city of Ghent, they were very powerful. When the Spanish came, the city of Ghent almost alone beat the Spanish kings. And they asked to work together with the big leader of the resistance was actually William from Orange, you know, the first king of Holland. And he didn't want to. He refused. He liked to work with hired soldiers because he knew when he accepted the help of the cities, the big cities, he was obliged to give in the nobility privileges. And he didn't want to do that because he was a like all big important man, not so, you know, nobility, you know. And then of course Holland became independent. They closed the river, the big river, the Schelde, the harbor, very big, and Flanders and Brabant, you know, the southern part became very poor. And then of course when we became finally independent, the Flemish part, the king spoke only French, the government spoke only French, all the administration was only French. Actually, they said about my people, the Flemish, they were like a kind of lesser Homo sapiens. They really said that. And then, of course, the war came, the First World War, and a lot of Flemish soldiers died because they couldn't understand the commands in French. They didn't obey already, and some were executed because they didn't follow orders they couldn't understand. And then, of course, a movement started. We call it the Frontbeweging. A movement started, and they tried to gain, you know, the work for the Flemish case. And of course, like it became also the Flemish became also, they followed. There was a big part of the Flemish who followed Adolf Hitler in the Second World War then, because he considered the Flemish as a brother, the brothers, because they were both Germanic, and so on and so on. So the conflict between the French-speaking part and the Flemish-speaking part was really horrible. I love the French-speaking Belgians. They have beautiful storytellers, and the stories they tell, a lot of them we tell, but they have their own stories because they live in the Ardennes and they have this beautiful landscape with, you know, little rivers, and they have it's beautiful nature there. And we have our stories, you know, we are like very close to the sea. It's very flat. And our stories, there is a lot of wind and the clouds are very low. And, you know.
You have looming stories.
we have some great stories. Yes, we have, because, and that was very strange for me when I first performed in England. I told some stories, and one of them was from my grandfather. It took me, because I'm telling stories now like from a long time, but when I'm telling stories as a professional storyteller, and that means receiving money for it. That's one way to say you're professional, because you're selling yourself as a storyteller. In the beginning, I told, you know, the big stories, the big Greek myths, things like that, you know. I never considered that stories that my grandfather told me would be good enough for it. And one of the first that I did was in England, actually. I was doing a story walk with Timber Alves, and I told a story about the gravedigger and the mole. And I think I told it also, I don't know if I told it in your, but
I think you should tell it now.
it's a long story. It's going to take too long, but it's actually such a beautiful story. And then I realized the true beautiful stories for me, when I speak about tradition, are coming from my family.
And I bet those are the ones that people want to hear as well. And I think so often that's how people start out, and they kind of, it's like the story of the story of the Peddler of Swaffham, that it is that thing that you have to go out and like something from somewhere else is always much more exciting, and that's where the great treasures are. And actually you find out that the most important stuff is always the stuff in your own backyard.
And the beautiful thing is, once I met Kamini Ramachandran. She was once at the Festival of the Edge.
Who's that again, sorry?
Kamini Ramachandran. She's from Singapore. And she came to a very big storytelling festival in Belgium, Aldenbiesen, and we were actually, at the last night, we were just the two of us there. So we had dinner together, and we talked about stories like storytellers do when they meet storytellers. They talk about stories. And she said, tell me now a story from your family, something you got from your grandfather. And I told a little story. I translated that to English, to the Pooey birdie. And it's just a joke that my grandfather always told. It's such a beautiful story. It's a naughty story. It's about, maybe I can just give like the bones.
Tell us. Stop teasing us, and tell us.
But it's actually, I like to tell it for children. They love it, and when the parents are standing behind him, they come into the story, and it's actually. The host has spotlighted. Okay, yeah.
We want to see you in full view.
It's a story from my grandfather. My grandfather was Frans Koenen, and when he was very young, he lived in a very little hamlet, and he didn't like to go to the cities. There are no trees. There are no flowers, no birds singing. He was just this man who lived in a hamlet and walking around in his wooden shoes with a little shag in his mouth and his beret, and he was working in his garden and so on. So one day a letter comes, and he had to go to Leuven, and Leuven is quite an important city in Belgium. You should know about it because it's really a great city. He had to come to the city because it was a letter from the judge. You should come to court because you have to explain some things. But what he had to explain is another story for another time. But there was, of course, this big sigh. He had to go to the city next Tuesday. So next Tuesday came very fast. He stood up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he went to the little place where you wash. It was like a bowl of water, and he shaved himself and he washed himself. He went to the bedroom, and his best clothes were lying on the bed. His best clothes. When people in Belgium, in Flanders, went to the city, they put on their best clothes. And, they were not very comfortable, not like the usual things he was wearing. He had to put on these trousers, and they were like very tight. It was actually the costume where he married in. He had to put on a shirt and, close all the buttons. And he said, should I close this one because I can't breathe? Close it, she said. And he had to close it. And then he had a tie. And he had to do it from my grandmother, Julia. So his vest, and instead of this beautiful, easy black beret, he had to wear a beautiful hat. He had to wear shoes. And he was standing there. He received the 3 letters, the invitation for the court. He put it in his bag, in his pocket, 3 kisses, up. Took the train to Leuven, stepped out of the station, and Leuven is like a city. And the place of the station was like empty because everybody was still in bed. He was so early there because when in my land you go to a place, you are in time. It was far too early there, and he was standing there, and there was no tree. There was no bird singing. There was no flower. A big sigh, and then he got a big problem. He had to go to the toilet. He had to do, and not like the little one, but the big delivery. And of course, he couldn't do it because when he was at home, there was you found a big tree. You went behind the big tree. You lowered your pants and finished. And then you find some leaves and you cleaned yourself up and upla. No tree. but he had to go very urgent. And so finally, he said, everybody is asleep. Nobody will see it. Nobody will hear it. Nobody will know it. So he lowered his pants, he lowered his underpants, and he was delivering there a huge pile of, well, let's not go into detail, but it was, now he had nothing to clean himself. And then he saw the 3 letters of the judge and he thought, so many papers, what is needed for? And he cleaned himself with one of those and maybe a second one. So he had still one to show to the judge. And he started to, to put his pants on, to pull his pants up. And then he heard a sound and he looked up, and out of a street came a man on a bicycle. And the man came closer and he saw that it was a policeman wearing his police stuff. And he was coming closer and he looked at this big pile, this dropping on his feet. And I think probably it will be forbidden. And the man came closer. So he took his hat and he put it over the pile of poo. So of course the policeman saw something. He put his bike aside and he said to my grandfather, "What did you hide under that hat?" And my grandfather said, "What? What did you hide under that hat?" Oh, my grandfather said, "My name is Frans Koenen. I'm coming from a little hamlet, Langdorp. And, I like nature. I like to walk in nature. I like to walk in the forest. I know every bird. Every bird, you can't believe it. Said, I saw here a very rare bird. I only saw it twice in my life. And here, you can imagine that in this place of stones, I saw it and I even could catch it." And the policeman asked, "Well, what is that kind of a bird?" And he said, "It's a pooey birdie." Or like we say, a kakkewiet. A pooey birdie, said the police. "Yes, it's very rare." And the policeman becomes interested and he says, "Can I see it?" "No," said my grandfather. "It's not only very rare, it's already very fast. If you lift it, and he's away." And the policeman just didn't say anything. He just, opened the buttons of his jacket, put it out on the bike, started to roll up his sleeves, and he said, "I'm a policeman. I'm very trained and I'm very fast too. Please put your hand on the head." My grandfather said, "What?" "Put your hand on your head. I count to 3. You pull it away and I will take the pooey birdie." And my father said, "Put your hand on." And, okay. And the man started to count, his face becoming very red, all these hairs on his hand, ready to take the little pooey birdie. 1, 2, 3, hop and flash. And he had him, and between his fingers, the little poo, came. And then my grandfather said, "I told you it was very fast, The wee birdie flew away and the poo stayed behind." And that's the story I told Kamini Ramachandran. And the strange thing she said then to me was, she said, "My grandfather in south of India told me more or less the same story when I was a young girl." And I thought, that is great.
My granddad didn't, but if he'd heard you tell it, he would have been telling it exactly like that the next day. That would have been right up his street.
It's a great story to tell for children because and with the parents and the grandparents and like we say, the wheat is the kakkewiet. We say kakkewiet. Wheat is like a birdie, but in the dialect way, and a kak is like a dropping piece of poo. De wheat is gaan vliegen and the kak is blijven liggen. And it's a great story to tell. And my grandfather told it. He told it like like I'm telling it. I like I said, I put a little bit more in it. So, but it's such a great story to tell for kids. I think
it's a great story to tell anyway. There's lots of people laughing on the chat.
Oh yeah.
There's lots of hoorays and thank yous.
And if you then, of course, do a little bit research, you find there is one folktale I found in Flanders where the part of a hat and the poo is coming also back, but not in this way. This is far more funny, like my grandfather told it. It's not, of course, the only story, and
yeah, and it's funny that language thing. I mean, Shane's saying, in Suffolk, they always, as a child, they always used it with caca for poo, and the same up in the northeast, yeah, and in Wales, we've all got a variation of that word.
I think there is of course English is like a lot of languages. There is Danish, there is German, there is French, and I'm sure there is also Flemish, because when William the Conqueror conquered England, a lot of Flemish were with him, and actually his wife was Flemish. The first is that the Queen of England was Matilda of Flanders, was the wife of William
Here
the Conqueror.
at the Welsh borders, we still haven't forgiven him.
And actually, his son Henry I, she was married to Matilda from Scotland, but when she died, he remarried with a girl from Leuven, and Leuven is actually my city. Adelheid from Leuven became Queen of England. That's actually the two first queens from the Normandy house were from here. So Flanders was quite important, I think, when the English. And when I listen to the Scottish storytellers, and of course you, Amy, know the greatest of them all, and I see when they say, there was this story where you have a stick, a baton, and she said, so she took the stock, and the stock is like we would say it in Flemish, and she beat the kist. Is actually, a kist. You know what it is, a kist? It's a Flemish word, but Scots use it. It's like something you open and you put stuff in it and you close it. It's like and it's just a Flemish word. So language is beautiful. That it's always finding its way.
Well, we are so intertwined, aren't we? I mean, I do want to get political, but I'm trying very hard not to. I mean, free movement is not a new thing. I mean, we've been sort of bombing backwards and forwards all over Europe for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's not like, But anyway, but we are so intertwined, and people think that, maybe we didn't travel so much before travel got fast, but that's just not true. But I mean, I'm so pleased though to have finally heard one of your poo stories, because you've been telling me about your poo stories for some time, and I think there's a huge stock of poo stories for me still to hear. I mean, is this just a Fred speciality, or is this a Flanders thing?
If you know your history, Amy, when we speak, one of the great queens of the history, Queen of France, Queen of England, was Eleonora from Aquitaine.
Don't tell me she was telling poo stories.
She sponsored actually a lot of troubadours, and we have the impression that on the courts only this unbelievable well-dressed troubadour or minstrel would come and sing very beautiful songs about King Arthur and his knights and Gawain, and of course they did, but mostly the most popular stories, also in courts, were about sex and were about shit, about poo.
It's all right.
And when you see, when you read the Canterbury Tales, or when it's all over. They were telling stories, and they were very like, how did I come? It's actually by accident a little bit, but I did once a program in Festival at the Edge for the kids, the poo stories, and it's always because they like it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we all do, don't we? I mean, like the oldest riddle I know is about a fart. I mean, it's just, and it still works today. Just people's humour hasn't really changed in 1,000 years.
maybe I told you this. I had once a performance in an English school, and the kids were like 15 years old, and it was in a hall, a big hall, and it was echt filled, and I performed together with Shawnee. And she did me the honor to open. And I was going to do one of my poo stories, another one, brilliant one, but I'm not going to tell that now. And while we were driving to the place, I said, I have a story about shit, I said. And she looked at me because I wasn't so experienced in English language at that time. She said, you can't use the word. It's a swear word. You can't use it.
I have to say, Norman's come up with a brilliant alternative, which is poonacular. I love that, the poonacular.
Yeah. So I said, what can I use? And then she said, a pile or a dropping or whatever. And I said, okay. Well, I said to her, it's about shit. Yeah, no, it's a forbidden word. She said, okay. So we went to the school, 150 kids in a uniform, totally not interested in the story because they're showing non-verbally, what the fuck are we doing? Like, they were not interested. And the teacher was screaming, hey, silence! Rah, rah, rah. I thought, what is this? And I looked at Sean and she said, So, and then she went away and they were silent, but they were like not interested. You know, they were like, you know, with their arms like that. Like, and I started to say something in Dutch and they were like, what is he saying? Because they didn't understand me. So I introduced myself in Dutch. And then I said, you don't understand me because that's my mother tongue. I'm a storyteller from Flanders. And my first story will be a story about shit. I really shouted it out. And the teacher, you know, or Adam's apple was like, doo-doo-doo. But I had their attention.
That is not something that we would be able to get away with, but you use what you've got. And I think there's definitely advantages to it not being your first language.
All about connection. And you know, Pooh is a very good connector, like I learned that day, because they really were listening. And then, you know, you hooked them and then you can.
Absolutely. As Phoebe's saying, universal human experience. So tell me about, I mean, because we've sort of talked about the history a bit. Can you tell me what storytelling is like in Belgium? What is there kind of a new storytelling scene, and is it connected to traditional story, or is it how is the tradition moving on? Where is it currently in Belgium now?
Well, it's not that great, you know. It's not that great. There is a scene and there is a new scene. Of course there is, because we have, and we can be proud on that, we have one of the biggest storytelling festivals in the world, actually. And that's already like for almost 20 years in Aldenbiesen. It's in Limburg. There is this huge castle, you know, it's really a castle from the German knights. And it's not only the castle, it's all the buildings. And it's a beautiful venue. There are a lot of rooms to tell, and there come storytellers from all over the world. And we tell in 8 languages. In the festival, like it was, because it's changing now a bit, not like it was, you could see there were like more than 20,000 kids came listening to story.
Well, is that what it is? Is it a language festival? Is it for children learning languages? Is it aimed mostly at young people?
Yes, well, it's about language, of course. It's about language, and during the day, the schools are coming, and like the first 2 days, it's like those who are 12 and 13 years old, and they choose often storytellers from Flanders. But some schools, because they're busy with language, they choose storytellers who will tell in French. And of course, the English storytellers also, because English is also a very important language in our schools. So those are 3 main languages we use. And then when you go bigger, the groups are a little bit lighter, but there's storytelling in Spanish, there is storytelling in Italian, there is storytelling in Portuguese was there, in Swedish was there storytelling. And at night, adult people come, language classes, but in general, like more than 20,000 people come that week. Another terrific part of it is that the storytellers sleep there. They are there. And at evening, they eat together and they speak together and they drink together and they talk together and they tell stories together. And that's a unique festival, because we all sleep in our separate rooms, of course, but we all sleep at the same place. And sometimes it's like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning before you go to bed. And then this meeting is quite good. In the beginning, the organizer, Guy Tilkin, had some problems to find, so he told me, from Flanders. There were a few, most of them actors, who could really, you know, from their acting skill, told some stories like from the mythology. But because of the festival, more and more storytellers from Flanders became interested in storytelling. And I have to say, in the beginning, a lot from the acting group. But they are, a lot of those were also very interested in the oral storytelling tradition. And when I first came there, I was actually, I'm one of the oral storytellers because I never followed acting classes. I never did. I will tell you later how little my way was. But there is a scene. We are not very organized. We are very, it's very, because like in comparing to Holland, they're great organizers. They have immediately organizations and teaching, and they write books. I think in Flanders only 2 books are written. In Holland there are like 20 books written about storytelling. With us only 2. So there is a community, and I have to say the French-speaking part is very bad, and certainly concerning the oral storytelling tradition is really good organized. They are to the tradition. For us, it's growing there. I'm very interested in the traditional stories. I'm not only the only one. One of my very good friends, Rien van Meensel, is very experienced. Also, we have both of us together a library with a lot of books, but we're not alone. There are also Veerle and Lapsteen. There are a lot of, I shouldn't say names because I will forget some names. There is a community who's very interested also in the traditional part of storytelling. And you have this tension a little bit between the actors and the storytellers, but actually we agree more or less. You do that, I do this.
So, and is it traditional stories that they tell? I mean, because I kind of assumed when I looked and talked to you a little bit about Belgium, the fact that there's these really diverse communities of the French and the Flemish and all of this kind of melting pot of the different cultures coming in, the different languages. I mean, I live on the English-Welsh border, and I think because there's a border, because there's been tension there, it's a really rich place for stories because it's a way of asserting your identity. It's a way of kind of saying, well, this is where we come from and this is what we stand for, because those people just there, they're different. And they might be all right on some days, but like kind of this is what makes us who we are. And they've got their own stories that make them who they are. So you kind of get these sort of these stories that are very similar but told from different perspectives, and some of them are very generous and nice and lots of them aren't. I mean, there's also lots of those sort of stories about kind of, the clock tower that only has a clock on 3 sides because like the English wouldn't even give the Welsh the time of day. And there's lots of those, which is funny but not funny at the same time. And I thought that would probably be the same case in Belgium, but I'm not sure that it is.
Well, there are tensions, but we were too poor. Just the folk people and the just common people from the French-speaking part. They were working in the mines, and we were working in the factories. And we, the politicians, they use, when they want to be voted, and they say things like, you are poor because the French became, they get money, but they didn't get money, of course. Maybe the rich French business people got money. Actually, I never had so much problems with the French-speaking part, and they have a very rich way of telling stories, and that's really interesting.
I suppose not. I mean, I don't want to know about the antagonism, but I suppose it's just that thing of kind of when you want to make your community strong, that's what you do, is you build up the stories. And when you're poor, that's what you can do because it doesn't cost any money, and it is a folk art. It's something that doesn't cost any money. It's a brilliant way of bringing people together.
True.
And of talking about what's important to you. So that's why I thought there would be.
Yeah. Well, I have to start at the end of Little Garden, and on the end of the Little Garden there is a little cement wall. It's like 35 centimeters high, not higher than that. And behind that there is a rough. There is like an old tree. It's not like a beautiful golf terrain. It's a little bit rough. And it's the house of one of my grandfathers. The other one, not the one of the poo, but the other one. He was a laborer in a factory, and every morning at 6 o'clock or at 5:30, a siren started to, and as a young kid, I still remember that. And he had to go on these wooden shoes with his, hat on and a cigarette in his mouth, and you heard the sound of this wooden shoes, get-a-dang, get-a-dang, get-a-dang through the streets. And at night, at evening, they gathered at the little cement wall. And we as children, we played. And, they came, his brother, Jean, came. And my uncle, Roger, came there. And my father came. And the one who was lowering, the train station, when the train, he was lowering for stopping the cars and the bike. Remike, he was called. And he was the one who stopped the cars. And he came. And some people came. And they started telling about, that was a community. They start telling stories about the war. They were starting telling us about, the street, what he did. Sometimes there was a little tale in between. And for me, thinking back on everything I tried to learn about storytelling, that is the heart of the tradition. That. And it's not the stories alone. Actually, the more important thing is the connection, the warmth. I can almost getting tears in my eyes when I think about that. It was so great. And of course, you had these little groups everywhere in the streets. People at the evening sometimes, they opened the doors, put their chair on, started to work on their fish material or the peeling potatoes or whatever. There were like more than 100 people sitting in the streets, telling stories, gossiping, jokes. And then the guy with the ice cream came with a horse, and he came and then we children were stroking the horse. That is the tradition of community. And of course, we told stories from the other streets, And when there was a card play in a pub from the others, sometimes there was a fight. It doesn't begin with language. It begins, that's you have your own community, and then of course. But for me, that is tradition, because when I'm telling a story like the Pooey Birdie, it's a story from my grandfather. And there was this moment that I realized, a horrible moment that in the beginning, you realize you resemble your father. When I do, or when I bend over and I start to open, to do something, and then, geez, my father did that too. I'm becoming my father. And of course, I'm carrying my father in me, and my uncle, and my grandfathers, and. So I'm the end of a line. But for me, tradition is that connection that I am. And that's unbelievable strong for me, that feeling that you're part of that family, that community. And the thing that keeps us together are the stories. Because if you don't have stories, it's emptiness. And if you don't know your own stories and your history, you can't embrace another culture. You can't open your arms from somebody else. And that's for me the center of tradition.
I think that's just absolutely beautiful, Fred, and I completely, utterly agree. And Sarah's sort of saying, well, if you try and other people, division is created tensions. I absolutely agree with that as well. I wasn't recommending that when I was talking about kind of that way, but when you have different communities pushed up against it like that, you have to make your own community stronger. But then what happens, and I think most people here, that's probably why you're interested in storytelling. Tell us, write down what brings you to storytelling. But I think certainly for me, that sense of connection, of getting to know other people, is really at the heart of it. And that is that thing that you start exploring those little pockets of community, and when you stretch out, you find that a lot of the stories are very similar, and that you're all coming from the same place. And that's when you realize that they're not other at all, that all of the people are the same, and that we all care about the same things and have the same things at the heart of our communities. And that's when those communities can start to open up, and hopefully there's a lot more communication and openness and possibility, which is why the world needs stories more than ever right now.
Well, when I tell, because I'm also teaching also in a circus school, I'm teaching juggling and circus theater and things like that. And sometimes I'm telling stories. And these young kids, they have a lot of television, they have a lot of things to do, and and communities are like nobody is stepping outside this door, or everybody is sitting before a screen as it is, of more than it used to be. And when I propose to tell a story, then they gather around me, and some of them are like, I think that's it. That's what they feel. It's like, covering themselves in a beautiful story, and enjoy that. That's great.
Well, and I'm constantly told, and I don't know if it's the same in Belgium, that kind of children don't have the same attention span anymore, that they won't sit and listen to stories for this long, and teenagers are an absolute lost cause, and that the only stories that they'll listen to are ghost stories or urban myths and legends. And it's, you have to get people at the right time, but teenagers love to be told stories. And quite often, the stories that they want to hear are actually quite often the sweet and the cuddly ones. You might need, you have to get past the cool factor first, and they might want to have the urban legends and the ghost stories first. But a lot of them have missed out on kind of levels of the stories that they may, I say should have. I mean, that's my opinion, is it? But that you would expect them to have had at certain ages. And it's kind of like they need to go back and have those stories and fill up on them now, because they missed out on them the first time round. And that's exactly what they want to do. They just want to kind of cuddle up and have that sleepover thing and just bathe in stories. And it's a very beautiful thing when you get those moments. Absolutely.
It is. Yeah, it is. But there is so much to tell. But that's because we have actually very famous stories in Flanders. We have the stories of the fox, Reinhard of us, and I don't know, the fox Reinhard. You heard about it? It's a story written down by a writer from Damme, like more than 800-900 years ago. Willem die Madokke maakte, wrote that story, and that actually it's very like a signature story from who we are. We don't like our rulers. We're always occupied, so we don't like them. So it's a satire, but it's really a hard story. It's not really a children's story. And but he's very, in our lands, he's very famous. And I know, van de Vos, the fox Reinhard. It's there is a wolf, Isengrim, there is a bear, Bruin, there is all these animals are like characterizing humans like they know in society. And it was really, really, it's really very good. We have the story of Heer Halloween. It's a pretty dark story about a young lady of nobility who asks her father, can I go and see Heer Halloween? And he says, no, you can't, because he's dangerous. You can't do that. He will kill you. And she said, but she's stubborn. And she goes to her mother, can I see Halloween? She said, no, you can't. So she goes to her brother, can I go? And he says, I don't care where you go, but behave yourself. So she puts her beautiful clothes on, she beautifully dresses up, and then she rides on a horse. Like we say, en al zingend en al klingend reed zij door het bos. She was singing in a very beautiful way. And then she meet him. And of course he wants to kill her because he is a bastard. So he takes his sword ready to behead her. And then she said, stop, because I'm a maiden, I'm a virgin, and my blood is really spreading very far. So you should put your tunic and put it off, because otherwise it will be ruined. And he said, that's true. So he put down his sword and she takes the sword and she's beheading him.
Hurrah!
And then, of course, the head starts to speak, and he says, go to that place and take the ointment and put it on my neck. She says, no, I don't. Go and blow the horn. No, I don't. And finally, she takes the head, and again, she's singing and riding through the woods. And in the end, wordt gehouden a banquet, a very posh table, and the head was put in the middle of it. And that's a very famous ballad, from Flanders.
Yeah, we have, and people are saying we've got variations of that. We've got versions of it, not that one.
We have.
I know the one where she puts in this Pretty Polly as well, the girl with the parrot. Is the person, yeah. So in ours, she doesn't tell her parents, and she creeps back, and the parrot's going, I'm going to tell on you. And so if you don't tell on me, I'll give you a cake of gold. So I'm not entirely convinced that a parrot would want, but anyway, it does shut up. We are getting close to the end of our time. So I don't know if anybody out there has any burning questions that they want to ask Fred. What I'm interested in is kind of where we've talked a lot about where storytelling is now and the history of Belgium. Where do you see it going? Where do you want to take storytelling in Belgium? What's happening there? What's gonna be January? What's your New Year's resolution for storytelling in Belgium?
We should bring it to schools. We should try to tell a lot for children, because that feeling, that togetherness, is a very important thing. That's one part. There's also a lot of educational stuff, but I truly think stories connect. Stories let us make understand about other cultures. Sometimes, and I'm telling to, there are a lot of people come and say, let me tell you a story from Palestine. And you're like, what? Yeah, story from Palestine. And then afterwards they say, it's much like our stories, isn't it? And the values and that. So we should go out and tell stories. That's what we should do. Tell stories.
Are you not already doing this?
Yes, I'm doing that. But we should, and the thing is, of course, and that's the challenge, stories, tradition should be alive. I think some storytellers approach to bring it in a very traditional way, then you only tell for that circle of people. Once, long time ago, a lot of people run away when you start like that. They run away because that's for your circle, and that's okay. But you also need to break the circle. You need to find other circles. You need to connect to them and try to find a way to tell the tradition that's very deep rooted in a way that's working for now. And that's the challenge, I think, for the storytellers, to find a way to tell it in a way that people from today will listen, will be interested, will open their eyes, even if you have to use the word shit.
I have no problem with that. I think there is a lot of value in the word shit.
Yes, that's maybe the most and the main thing to remember.
Perhaps this is going to be my New Year's resolution, to find more stories about shit. I do know a few. But yeah, Shane, absolutely. It's about knowing your audience, and it's about, but I suppose that's the thing that you're saying as well, isn't it? That it's not your audience, it's a new audience. It's going to be a different audience, and it's maybe having the confidence to stretch out to somewhere where you don't know if it's going to go well or not, and where you're having to find a new connection every time. And sometimes you'll succeed, and sometimes maybe you won't. Sarah's asking, do you change stories to happy endings sometimes just because you can?
No, I never do. A story is what it is, and I have not only programs about shit. I tell stories about death to the kids, and the kids are like 8 or 9, because there's so much terrific stories about death, and they are busy with that, and sometimes a story about that will not end happy. But stories is to make understand the world, and in the world not everything is happy, and kids can take it. They really can.
I think they need it. I think it's really damaging and really hurtful when you hear stories of people die and they come back to life, and there's always a magic this and a magic that, and there is no sense of forever. There's no grief and there's no loss, and you need to have models for how to do that, and to know that is going to come and that's going to happen. But there are people to help, and there's absolutely Shane saying you can stimulate conversation with the children. You need to give openers, but at the same time, if you're going to have those openers, you also have to have a little bit of support network available.
One of my best responses to a story about that was a little boy from 6, and I was telling a story about the daughter and the grandfather, And the daughter is always asking questions like little children are doing. And she was also like 6, 7, and she says, "Why are the leaves falling in the fall?" And he says, "Because they're dead. They die and then they go on the ground. But that is not the end. It's also the beginning of new growth, because they go and then blah 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 blah. And then in spring she sees a little bird dead on the ground. Why? Because maybe there was not enough. But it's not the end. Every end is also a new beginning. You shouldn't be afraid of Mr. Death." And then one day, there she is with her grandfather, and and he says, "Shall I make pancakes?" He says, and I says, "I forgot the milk. I need to go to the shop. Stay at home." I call her a little bit. So grandfather is away. Knock on the door. There is Dad. And she says, "Hi, who are you?" "I'm Dad." "Oh, come in," she says, because she's not afraid. And she says, "No, I'm not here for you. I'm coming for your grandfather." And she says, "Okay, wait. You can wait here." "No, I have some business to do. But when he's coming back, tell him that I was here." So that is away. Grandfather comes home, starts to make the pancakes, putting on the fire. The smell of fresh baked pancakes is filling the living. And he says, "Anything happened?" She said, "Yeah, there was Dad came for you." And he switched off the fire and he says, "What?" "Yes, Dad is coming for you. He's coming back." And then he takes her and he hugs her and he says, "Maybe it's good that you go then to your parents." And he hugs her and she's going away. She's singing and dancing. And a little bit later, Dad comes and he sits on and he says, "You're coming for me?" "Yes." Well, grandfather says, "But what stops it, Dad? What is this smell?" "It's pancakes." I never tasted pancake in my life. Dad says, "I never did. It's. Would you mind to make?" And okay. And he starts to bake or to warm up the pan. And he eats it and it's really good. And he says, when I walk on the world, sometimes I have this smell. I think they call it coffee. And it would be so good together with a pancake. Could you make me a coffee? And grandfather says, okay, and makes a coffee. And he's really enjoying it. And they have a conversation, they talk. But then grandfather, said, "Okay, Mr. Dad, stop now, because I know you're going to take me. I know you're going to take me now, but let's go then." And Dad says, "Yeah, but I'm not going to take you. But I know everything. I see everything. I hear everything. Everybody's afraid of me. And then you come and you say to your daughter that is not the end. It's always a new beginning." And I thought, let's visit the one person who's not afraid of me. And I had pancakes and I had a good cup of coffee. So thank you for that. And he's going to the door and he's closing the door almost, and he's opening it again, and he says to grandfather, "But the next time I come, you have to go with me." And grandfather says, "That's okay. Going with a friend is no problem." And I told that little story, and that little boy came to me and he wanted to shake my hand. And he said, "Tonight I will be able to sleep." Mm. And for me, that was,
Yeah, it's one of my favorite Duncan stories. But is that where you got it from?
Story? No, yeah. I got it from Tube.
Well, it is such a beautiful story, and I think
story, yes,
possibly the perfect place to end as well, in this, the death of an old year, the beginning of a new year, the beginning of who knows what is coming. But let's hope whatever is coming comes as a friend. And that there is hope coming out of the dark days of winter as we head into spring and the leaves begin to grow once more. So thank you so much for joining me tonight, Fred. Thank you for being my guest on Taking the Tradition On. Thank you to all of the people who are here tonight, who've been talking to me on the chat. It's just absolutely a delight to have your company and your questions and your comments. Just a few very little things to finish off with, just to say thank you again to Get a Word and Edgeways, who let me borrow their Zoom, and talking of new beginnings, there will be a concert next week on Thursday, where we're talking about the festival going carbon neutral and the things that the festival is doing to do that. This Friday is going to be Belast with Stories of the Seven Sea, the Green Meadows of Enchantment. So have a look on my Facebook page, Amy Douglas Storyteller. Have a look on Fred's Facebook page for all the stuff that he is doing. There are lots of marvellous events coming up. And if you do like taking on the tradition, and if you would like to be a supporter of taking on the tradition, if you would like to hear first who my guest is for next month, it is already up on my Patreon site, and I would love to have some more patrons, and to have small amount of money each month just to help have the time to do this and the other free things that I do, but also the support of your conversation and your suggestions and advice, and just to have a space to talk about taking the tradition on and other things. So if you would like to, please do check out the Patreon site. But for now, just to say thank you once again to the marvellous, the wonderful Fred Versonnen. Thank you very much for coming to talk to us, for your stories, for telling us. I've learned a lot about Belgium and about you, and I know that there are many, many, many more conversations that we could have. So thank you all. Happy New Year. Go well into this new 2021, and look forward to seeing you all hopefully next month. So good night for now.
Thank you all.